Hey, this is Burl Neal again, and this is the second of my recordings. And I'd like to clear up something I said in my first recording. I mentioned that I'd lived in Newnan, Georgia for 15 years with my second wife. I was born and raised in Arkansas, and in 1969, I married my high school sweetheart, Peggy Kelly. And we were married for 35 and a half years before she passed from ovarian cancer, and that was in 2005. And a little over 2 years later, I met a lovely lady, a widow herself, here in Georgia, and 3 months later we were married. So it tells you how lovely a lady she is, and it was. So just to clear that up, and that's how we came to be, and how I came to be in Georgia. But these readings came about as a challenge from our middle daughter, Ashley. So I'm going to read another one. These are short stories that I've just written for my own amusement over the years, but she said she wants these online so the kids can see them, the grandkids. So here we go. This one I call Clowns and Yard Sales. I'm a yard sale aficionado, so this is right up my alley. Yard sales are a mysterious and wonderful thing. Where else can you find true treasures for a pittance and spend a delightful morning just visiting with folks? Well, that was Denzel Worth's estimation of his favorite pastime. He carefully scoured the classifieds on Friday nights for all the Saturday sales, plotted them on his map, then listed them in the most efficient order for getting to all of them in the least amount of time and with the least expenditure of gasoline. Now, he had a couple of things in mind that he hoped to secure this Saturday, a gorgeous late April morning in Anno Domini 1967. Well, there were a couple of tools that he still wished to have, but simply refused to pay new prices for, and he was always alert to nab something for his grandsons, Laddie and Jess. They were big fans of anything that flew or resembled a weapon. Well, Denzel pulled up in front of a neat but small clapboard house on Ridge Street, an older part of town that was enjoying a renaissance of sorts. An influx of workers for the new Buick plant nearby had brought new money to town and a need for housing for the owners of that money. Smart thinkers in town had bought up several of the small houses in the area, slapped some paint on them, and patched up the plumbing and the roofs, and rented them out to the Buick folks. The head of one of those Buick families had been offered a promotion and a raise, and his family was about to move into a house of their own. God bless General Motors was their motto these days. They were having a yard sale and to thin down the load of stuff they'd have to move into their new digs. Well, Denzel got out of his old pickup. It was old maybe, but still in perfect working order and still looking good. Denzel always thought of that. With his hands thrust into his pockets, he sauntered up to the array of tables on the front lawn, nodded a greeting to the lady sitting in the lawn chair in the shade of a hickory tree. A card table was her desk, and she stuffed bills in a carpenter's apron around her ample waist as customers paid her for the goods they were carting away. Made enough to retire yet? Denzel asked the lady. Well, not yet, but if I can make another million by noon, I'll call it quits and hightail it to Bora Bora. Sounds like a plan. Well, Denzel grinned at the comeback and moved slowly among the tables, picking up the occasional doodad for closer inspection and then carefully returning it to its place. He picked up an old Barlow pocket knife that looked like the one his dad had given him when he turned 12. He would pay whatever the lady asked for that. The next item to catch his eye was an old camera, the kind that looked like an accordion on the front end. The latches and lenses and framework of old cameras struck him as works of art that could do amazing things. Tucking the new find under his arm, he turned his attention to an old iron skillet, the kind his mama had always used to cook cornbread in. Clutching the handle in his right hand, the weight of it seemed to him a good thing, like it was an anchor for some old memory that he couldn't quite bring into focus. After a few more minutes perusing the remaining tables, Denzel moved toward the lady under the tree to provide whatever ransom she might require in return for the treasures he held. He had just laid the knife and camera on her table and was reaching into his back pocket for his wallet when the screen door on the side of the house next door swung open hard enough that it pivoted all the way around on its hinges and smacked the side of the house. falling askew when the upper hinges gave up the ghost. A slender woman in her early 30s hurtled out of the door backwards and landed flat of her back. Denzel could hear her gasping for the breath that had been knocked out of her by her rude landing on the hard-packed earth. The lady under the tree turned in her chair at the sound of the ruckus. Dear Lord, they're at it again in broad daylight, no less. Denzel had already started toward the downed women to see if he could help, the skillet still in his right hand. Before he could cross the 30 or 40 steps between him and the woman, a tall, muscular man in dirty khakis and undershirt stepped through the opening where the screen door had been. The first thing that ran through Denzel's mind was that the man's bright shock of orange hair looked just like that of the clown he had seen at the opening of the new Esso station last week. Well, clown hair stepped to straddle the stunned woman who was struggling to raise herself up on her elbows. A sweeping backhand struck her flat again, and her head literally bounced off the dirt yard. Hey, Denzel yelled, stop that now. He had traversed the yard and was closing on the enraged man. The man turned his attention from the now still woman, and the rage burning in him found a new target, the old man yelling at him and charging at him. Pulling himself up to his full height, the man squared off at Denzel. Back away, old man. This ain't no concern of yours. No, you back away. You ain't hitting her again. Bitch back talked me and you saw what she got. You sure you wanted to be telling me what's what? I'm just telling you, you ain't hitting her again. I won't allow it. Clown hair moved with amazing speed for a man his size. Denzel had never been a fighter and was equipped with neither the grace nor quickness that would have been required to fend off the vicious left hook that was aimed at his head. He didn't have time to do anything but throw up his right hand to protect himself, a thing he did reflexively. What neither man had considered was the 12-inch cast iron skillet still gripped firmly in Denzel's right hand. When his reflexes brought his hand up as the only rampart against the onslaught hurtling toward him, the skillet had just naturally come along for the ride, placing it directly in the path of the man's left hand. The left hand driven in its arcing loop by a very strong left arm and shoulder and further fueled by the man's drunken rage. The outfall of this quickly unfolding predicament was that the aforementioned left hand had a violent collision with the raised skillet. There was an odd thong sound, and several bones in that hand promptly shattered. Quite painfully, it would seem, judging from the howl emitted by the heads sporting all the orange plumage. The man turned and ran back into the house, holding his savaged hand to his chest, leaving Denzel to wonder what sort of divine intervention had saved his right jaw from a severe mangling. The yard sale lady arrived breathlessly behind him and knelt down to help the lady, who was now moaning and trying once again to raise herself. Shading her eyes from the sun, she glanced up at Denzel. Call the cops, she said. Turning to the woman, she said, lay still, darling, till I can check you out a little. Look at me, you old sumbitch. Clown hair was at the door again. The injury to his hand had only added to his anger, now a blood rage. He pointed an old .22 revolver at Denzel and fired off a round. The bullet buzzed by his ear and struck the hickory tree next door. His first thought was for the ladies, and Denzel shuffled away as swiftly as he could to put distance between him and the two women. A second shot cracked and kicked up dirt at Denzel's feet. Denzel had always been an even-tempered man. He had never felt the need to resort to violence to settle any difference. Such things were foreign to his very nature. But something rose up in him, a heat with a white-hot core. But it was also icy in nature. The heat flew through him, pumping levels of adrenaline into his body that he had never experienced before. At the same time, an icy calm came over him, bringing everything into sharp focus, slowing everything to a glacial crawl. He could see the man struggling to cock the old gun a third time, but as if it were in a movie that had been slowed way, way down. He could hear the man's teeth gritting against each other as he grimaced with the effort of his preparation for the coup de grace. Denzel began running straight toward his attacker. He could see the surprise and the determination mingled in the man's face as the orange hair shook in slow motion. After what seemed an eternity, Clown Hair had gotten the hammer cocked and was raising the gun one more time, too close to miss this time. Denzel's charge had brought him into a position right in front of the man. With everything in him, Denzel hurled the old skillet that had saved him just minutes before. It hung in space between Denzel and the man who labored to kill him. He could easily count the revolutions of that black missile as it rotated and moved forward. Clown Hair pulled the trigger, and Denzel saw the flash from the muzzle and tripped on a tree root in his headlong plunge. When he woke up, his mouth tasted of blood and dirt. Spitting, he rolled over, checking his chest for holes. There were none, but a split lip would be troublesome for a few days. Sitting up in the dirt, he first looked toward the women who were holding each other and looking in the direction of the ruined screen door. The skillet Denzel had aimed at the man's head had fallen short, colliding with the instep of his left foot, crumpling him to the dirt, roaring with pain and enmity. As Denzel was getting to his feet, so was Ginger Hair. Without the use of his left hand and left foot, he shifted his weight onto his right foot and struggled to right himself, pushing the barrel of the gun he still clutched in his right hand into the dirt as a makeshift crutch of sorts. His face contorted with the misery of his wounded appendages, sweat and dirt and blood lined its creases. Standing on his one good leg and raising his one good hand, he cocked the pistol one more time and leveled it at Denzel's head. With nowhere to run and no time to do anything else, Denzel straightened his back and determined to die without flinching. The man's shaking hand pulled the trigger, and the old .22 sounded the ear-splitting report of its own demise. The barrel had filled with dirt as the man struggled to his feet, and when he pulled the trigger, that plug of earth refused to budge as the explosion in the firing chamber sought to propel the bullet forward into Denzel's forehead. Instead of launching the slug, it only succeeded in rupturing the barrel with such violence that the old pistol blew itself apart, and as those parts separated from each other at a high velocity, the hand gripping the gun was mangled beyond repair. That hand would never play concert piano again, if it ever did, or point a gun at another old man, or plant a bruise on the cheek of another woman. With 3 of 4 limbs visited by violence, the man sank to his good knee and wept silently. Hope you enjoyed it.